I want to share my syllabus for America that I think we ought to push. And here's what it is. It's only one course. I don't want to try to overwhelm us with anything else. But I do think a single course ought to be required everywhere. A financial education course, I think, ought to be mandatory for anybody to complete high school. I really think we're to the stage now where if we don't get this underway, we're just going to get ourselves into trouble. And I think it should cover three things. Personal finance, and I think this should be obvious, given the unbelievable levels of household debt and credit card debt and lack of savings and all this, the housing bubble and the subsequent panic that it created in the markets, all of these things. It's really important for people to have a solid basis in personal finance. Now, I remember taking what we called an economics course in high school. It was largely a personal finance, household economics course. How to go out and, pay the rent and apply for an apartment or apply for a job or apply for a mortgage. Some of those things, apply for credit cards, open a bank account. Because to be honest with you,
it's a very practical class, sounds like.
Extremely practical.
Not a macroeconomic so much.
No, exactly.
Okay.
It wasn't.
Very practical class.
And that would be the second part of what I would put in here is what I would call an honest to Milton Friedman economics class. I think that should be in there as well. That we would talk about the larger scale of economics. So yes, let's do a personal finance component to this, and let's also do a big scale economics component to this.
But does the big scale economics component get political?
It could be politicized, yes. Just like social studies classes can be politicized, just like, frankly, English courses can be politicized. I mean, you can politicize almost anything that is in the social sciences. That's because they're social. They are partially subjective. And in the fine arts and the humanities, virtually anything can be politicized if somebody tries. But in general, I trust that most people are going to try to avoid the politicization. Obviously, that's not always true. We hear fight over like textbooks, and what's included in textbooks all the time, whether it's social studies or science or anything else. I mean, these things happen. But that doesn't erase the fact that it's incredibly important for Americans to have a basic understanding of economics, of how the economy works. It's been the number one story in America, really, for the last 5 years. Running at money and money issues and how the economy works, they've been the number one issue really for the last half decade, if not longer. And this is inescapable. I mean, and the problem is, if you're totally uneducated about economic issues, you can't be expected as a voter to pick the right politicians. And if you don't think the politicians have an influence over how the economy works, well, then there's no hope for you. I mean, it's just unavoidable. And absolutely every public decision that's out there involves economics. I mean, whether it's on the big scale of who the president picks to nominate as the next Federal Reserve chair and who, is voted through and approved to be the next Fed chair, whether it's on that big scale, whether it's on the scale of the government deciding that they're going to put money into stimulus programs. That was one move that they've made of late. The government putting money into essentially a rebate. Remember when we were getting those big tax rebates a couple of years ago?
Right.
Please go spend this money was essentially the message that came along with that because they wanted to stimulate the economy. Or you have, as we did for a little while there, a partial suspension of the rate that you paid on Social Security and Medicare taxes because they wanted to give people more money in their pockets to go spend. All of those things are clearly economic issues, but so are the decisions about whether to build a new school in your district. And if you are in the Waukee School District, for instance, you face this question all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Constantly, because it's a growing town.
Vote coming up in a few months.
Exactly. Over and over again. And that's a huge economic issue. What's the answer and how do you build? Do you build that building so that it's going to last for 100 years and pay for it over the next 30? Do you build it so that it's going to last for 30 years while you're paying for it? Do you choose to go with a super low bidder and pay for something over 30 years but have a building that falls apart after 15? Because everybody can point to public buildings, schools, libraries, city halls, all of these things where In some cases, they built them and they've lasted for 100 years or more, and they're just still gorgeous. The former Central Library here in Des Moines, which is has been converted over to World Food Prize building. That's a gorgeous building, but it became non-useful to them as a library after a while, and so it evolved in how it's been used. And you can point to buildings that have not lasted anywhere close to what their expected life expectancies.
And it's an interesting point when you bring out the library. I want to jump in here.
Yeah,
it was a fine building to house books.
Yep.
But libraries are not necessarily just a book repository anymore.
Precisely.
Which is an interesting way of it steps right into what you're saying. That are you going to choose to do this for this and only this, or will you make it so you could use it for other things, or could you make it useful for something else, like the Hall of Laureates that it is now for the World Food Prize?
And do you pay for it over the time that you plan to use it? Do you expect to pay for it for longer than you're using it? Do you pay for it and expect it to be paid off and then be useful to you essentially for free for a long time?
And sometimes it makes sense to pay for it right away, and sometimes it makes sense to pay for it over an extended period of time.
Absolutely. And
but that's part of the economic education. Sometimes it makes more sense to pay for it over time as opposed to paying for it all at once.
And think about the horrible consequences of the fact that a lot of people just don't get the economy broadly. And here's the problem. It's not that people don't get it, really. Deep down, we all have a pretty good instinct for how the economy works because we're part of it. And it's a very human, very psychological thing. I mean, we all really get it. We just get told that we don't understand it. There's a whole industry, and it's not just Wall Street, but it is built around sort of the Wall Street edifice that tells you you're too stupid to figure this stuff out. And as a consequence, you need somebody else to help you along. And by the way, pay them a lot of fees in the meantime. I mean, there's a big industry built around telling you that you're too stupid to figure out the economy, but you're not. You really aren't. And it's not just Wall Street doing it, because it's also the politicians who take advantage of the fact that people are woefully uneducated about economic issues, and they propose things that tend to be incredibly bad for you, but they sell them as though they're really a great solution. Like the big deal right now going with selling everybody on income inequality as what will destroy America right now. So, I mean, just like the folks who are out there telling you you're too stupid to handle money, so you got to let us do it for you, and we'll take a 2% cut of everything that you have every year in order to handle your money for you. That crowd has a vested interest in telling you you're too stupid to understand the economy. So does the crowd that says, well, this is all about income inequality. Just vote us into office and we will solve it. We will take care of it for you. That crowd is equally invested in telling everybody they're too stupid to get economics. They are totally invested in this, and it's ethically, how about this? Ethically, it's almost criminal. Now, it's not literally criminal because they're the ones who make the laws, but like from an ethical standpoint, it is almost criminal that people get elected to office and hold office and sell people on re-electing them to office based off of doing things that are completely contrary to your economic best interests. But if the voters don't know a thing about how the economy works or are convinced that they don't know anything about it, then they vote against their own best interests with short-term thinking and budget deficits that are in the trillions of dollars and a federal debt that is in the trillions of dollars. It's in like the range of about $45,000 for every single one of us in the country today. $45,000 in debt. And it's not because we're building roads and bridges and airports and dams and locks and all kinds of things that may last for 50 years. It's because we aren't paying the bills on the stuff that we're spending right now. I mean, we're borrowing in order to pay for things that go right out the door. It's as though you were going in and borrowing money in order to pay for your groceries. You're not borrowing on a mortgage. Borrowing money over the long term for something you will use over the long term, like a house, that can be rational. That can be a reasonable thing to do. Borrowing money because you don't have enough around to pay for what you need right now, like your groceries, that's a problem. That's a very serious problem. And from a personal finance standpoint, that's a huge crisis. From an economic standpoint for a country, oh my gosh, I don't have words to describe how bad that turns out to be. And so as a consequence, we are really in desperate need of at least those two legs of the stool, the personal finance component and the economic component, to a syllabus for America. But I've got a third leg to this stool that you might not expect, but I think it could help with solving a little bit of the other two at the same time. We'll get to that in just a moment. 9:50 with the Brian Gongol Show on News Radio 1040 WHO. It is 9:53 here on News Radio 1040 WHO. I'm Brian Gongol here along with Brian Dean as we talk about making money and having fun. Now, we've been going over the last couple of minutes here my maybe a little unusual syllabus for America. It's not the contract with America or contract on America or anything like that. It's just a syllabus for America. I really sincerely believe it is well past time that we get ourselves on board with basically a required course in money for everyone before they get out of high school, and that it needs to cover three things. Number one, personal finance. You got to understand your own cash. Number two, it's got to understand or go over the economy broadly. How do the different things interrelate with one another? How does the bigger economy work? People need to understand that so they can be educated and informed voters. I mean, that's the whole point of education to a large extent, isn't it? To set people up so that they can take care of themselves, contribute positively within the economy and feed themselves and their families, but then also to turn out reasonable voters so that we can perpetuate this system so it works. I'll give you my third leg to this stool, and I know this may sound a little odd, but hear me out on this one. I think we need that third leg of that stool to be that everybody go through a course in family business. And how
family business. Explain that. What do you mean? Like small business?
Small business / entrepreneurship / closely held companies, whatever you want to describe it as. Generally speaking, family business. And I say this, now obviously being in a family business, it has a lot of relevance to me personally. But here's why I think it's essential. It really applies to everybody. The Golden Globes tonight have occasionally featured Julia Louis-Dreyfus, for instance, an attractive lady, a funny gal. Yeah. Also phenomenally rich, like unbelievably rich, because her family owns a gigantic firm that has interests in shipping and banking and all over the place. I mean, it's a huge company, and she is one of the heiresses. She's got a ton of money to her name. I think it's estimated that she is worth more than $1 billion just for her share in the family business.
Wow.
Yeah.
And she chooses to act for fun.
Absolutely. And
she's done very well.
I think she's funny on Veep. I really do. I think she's funny on there. I've watched that show, and I think I enjoy it. I mean, it's not like the greatest show I've ever seen, but it's funny. It's passable. It's certainly in my top tier of shows that I bother to watch.
So she's had a great deal of TV success. This is her third hit show.
Yeah. So, I mean, good for her, man, and that she's doing something even though she has no reason to do anything, at least financially. She doesn't have to do a thing. But the reality of it is that if you are an entrepreneur of any way, you are clearly involving your family's fortunes in your own business. So from that perspective, if we like entrepreneurs, if we like people who start up businesses, then those people are in family businesses, and thus wouldn't it be nice if people left high school with the knowledge, a basic knowledge of how a business works, in particular a small business, maybe at the foundational stages? That would be important so that those who have really good ideas then are equipped to go out, and if they want to go start one of those classic business in a garage kinds of things, that they know how it's done and that they know kind of how it works. And the fact of the matter is, really, I mean, if you received an inheritance, you effectively got a big dividend from a family business. Now, even if that was just your crazy rich uncle who invested on his own and then, when he died, left a whole bunch of money to all of the nieces and nephews or whatever, that could be the case, but that was still a business in essence that he was running. He may not have had, a sign on the wall or an office anywhere, but it was effectively a business. He was taking income coming in and then reinvesting it and turning it into more income. That's a business. And if you got an inheritance or hope to get an inheritance from anywhere, then you have an interest in what is effectively getting a dividend from a family business. And on top of all this, keeping money in an uncomfortable, we don't talk about that kind of zone like it is in a lot of families, that's terrible. It just means we end up economically stupid, which is why, in turn, we need more education about finances and money going on in schools. But we aren't capable of doing that because everybody, again, treats money like, we don't talk about that. That's rude. Well, it may not be polite to talk about what you're making for your salary in front of the neighbors, but you should probably talk about money with your family and understand how to talk about that. And the bottom line is, too, every family really is like a business. It's like a very small corporation. Whether or not you're making anything, putting your name on the side of things, handing out business cards, your family, in essence, runs like a business. You have income, you have outflow. You hopefully are building capital and ending up with a balance sheet that looks good. All of this is very business-like. And ultimately, we all need to know a little finance, a little accounting, a little economics, a little business law, all of these things so that we could make ordinary decisions within the economy about things that are as complex as health insurance, which everybody needs to be addressing right now, and mortgages, which have been a huge issue for the last couple of years and are certainly staying that way, and credit card applications and service agreements, and whether you go to school for 4 years or 8 years or whatever it happens to be for your decision making to get to a point where you're making the money that you want and doing something that you like. All of these are business decisions. And fundamentally, since all money kind of becomes family money, every family needs to think of itself like a business, and maybe we need some education in how to do that. That is my submission to you for my Syllabus for America. I've shared it online at my website, gongle.com. I will share a link to it on whoradio.com on the Brian Gongle Show page. And if you want to hit me up on Google Plus to harass me about it, feel free.
Google Plus.
There you go. We'll see you next Sunday night at 9 o'clock here on News Radio 1040 WHO.